It's kind of remarkable seeing how the cope regarding the Nintendo Direct immediately after it came out was that it was a disaster. Nobody's going to buy any of these games. The Switch 2 is a failure. Nobody is talking about it. And yet, reality shows quite a bit different. People complain about the Galaxy ports, said no one was going to buy it. Bestseller on Amazon, right? People were saying the Switch 2 was declining, that Donkey Kong Bonanza wasn't going to do well. Still doing well in the eShop, doing better than Silksong is actually. We were told that like Pokemon Legends ZA was getting day one DLC. Not true. The DLC is coming out in February. Yeah, like basically everything we were told about this direct, about the patents regarding Power World, about like everything Nintendo was doing about the Virtual Boy, everything was a complete and total lie. And I do think this needs to be prefaced. Like every single time Nintendo makes an announcement is that you're going to see grifters making videos about them, and those videos are going to be completely and totally wrong. Because there is no denying at this stage that Nintendo Switch 2 is a hugely successful platform with many successful first and third party games, but the general community is just going to drag their heels and just refuse to acknowledge it for as long as possible. If the Switch 1 was any indication, like we didn't see people acknowledge Switch 1 as a massive success until Animal Crossing New Horizons. And when that happened, all that they did was just say that the Switch was on the decline after that, and that a new console release was imminent, right? We were hearing about Switch Pro like as early as 2018, right? So the simple fact of the matter is, no matter what happens, no matter what Nintendo announces, no matter what they do, you are going to see individuals in the community seething about things that simply don't matter. For example, you have that guy who's complaining about not getting 3D Mario immediately after getting Donkey Kong Bonanza. Donkey Kong fans had to wait 26 years for a 3D platformer. Why can't you not just play Donkey Kong Bonanza? Why can you not just play the numerous other 3D platforming games that come out? Why do you have to play 3D Mario? And that's kind of my point when it comes to this direct. Like, if it's not Mario, Zelda, or Metroid, a significant chunk of the community just writes everything off and just ignores it. And that's kind of what we saw at this direct, where they announced nothing but bangers, and we saw, all these cringe takes from all these people that we're supposed to take seriously. For example, Arlo. Like, oh man, why are they showing Tamagotchi Life? They showed that a year ago. This isn't the kind of game Tamagotchi Life is actually one of Nintendo's biggest IPs. Like, Tamagotchi Life absolutely has the potential to surpass The Sims in relevancy, to do as well as Animal Crossing. Like, Tamagotchi Life is huge. The simple fact of the matter is that, like, the general gaming community has very little understanding of what actually is popular and what's not. Because I've spoken at length about how Metroid Prime 4 isn't going to do game busters for Switch. It's going to be far outclassed by Kirby Air Riders. There's I've talked a lot about how like a lot of people's pet projects don't do as well as a lot of other games. Like, there just seems to be this weird dissonance between like reality and the narrative. Like, just look at Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. The immediate response from the Nintendo community was to dismiss it and call it ridiculous and say the game was going to be terrible. And yet, meanwhile, it has become one of the most hype announcements in the direct. Even though you had dudes seething about it not being Kid Icarus, which, by the way, is not and never has been as relevant as Fire Emblem. Nintendo has, put out nothing but bangers all year long, and yet, like, the general community is doing that thing they always do, where they just whine, complain, and moan about stupid things that don't matter. Chief among them, the price points, right? Like, this is the go-to cope when it comes to like downplaying new Nintendo Switch 2 games, is complain about the price and complain them to vastly inferior budget games like Hollow Knight Silksong and Expedition 33, which, first of all, those games aren't as good as anything Nintendo produces. But second of all, like, what exactly do these games existing have to do with Nintendo's continued success at their price points? Like, how exactly does Expedition 33, a niche game that nobody has played and nobody cares about, how exactly does that game existing stop people from wanting to play Dragon Quest VII on Nintendo Switch or Tales of Xillia or anything else that's coming out? Why does Expedition 33 existing, how does it stop better RPGs from succeeding on Nintendo consoles? It doesn't. Hollow Knight Silksong, all that hype, all that enthusiasm, all that worship, all for a game that got mogged by Metroid Prime. A game that's not as good as Metroid Dread. It doesn't matter how much these games sell or how much people hype them or what the Metacritic score is. Like, they're always going to come in behind what Nintendo produces. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. Elden Ring, right? The narrative right now is that Elden Ring is the game of the decade and one of the best games ever made and FromSoft's masterpiece. This is supposedly a game that embarrassed Nintendo, upended the industry, and was a major success story in gaming. What happens? The new IP from the studio is locked down as a Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive, and not a single person is talking about it or excited about it at all, because Elden Ring was not popular or successful. Nothing about the game has really resonated with audiences at all. Nobody talks about the game. Nobody plays it. Nobody cares about it at all. The only reason Elden Ring had any relevancy whatsoever is because the industry needed something they can weaponize against Nintendo products. And a Nintendo exclusive is never, ever, ever going to fulfill that purpose. So Duskbloods, before we even know anything about it really, has already been dismissed and ignored by the general gaming community, which proves, by extension, just how inadequate FromSoft as a developer actually is. Because this is, in theory, something that should have sold Switch 2s, that should have gotten people hyped, that should have gotten people like fired up about the console and about 2026. But instead, we have everyone sitting on their hands just insisting that, like, well, the IP is owned by FromSoft, so they're going to make it go multi-plat, and it's going to be way better on PC. Like, it's just a gigantic cope. It really is nothing but a cope. And we really do need to address like all of these arguments as they come up, because it's becoming more and more apparent to me that these kinds of takes, they aren't motivated by love out of these franchises or these companies or like these games. Like, they are motivated by a sheer contempt and hatred for Nintendo. Like, it doesn't matter what wins as long as it's not Nintendo. And that's kind of why you see so many people rallying behind slop like Power World, like Expedition 33, like Silksong, like Hi-Fi Rush. It has nothing to do with those games. It's entirely just a flavor of the month title that you can use to distract people from the vastly superior Nintendo games that honestly come out every month at this point. I am really supposed to believe that gamers cannot find anything of interest on Switch 2. I am supposed to believe that third-party games don't sell well on this platform, even though that you can clearly see people on my friends list playing all sorts of third-party games. I'm supposed to believe that this console is a failure when nobody can seem to find them on store shelves. When it's breaking records, when it had this really successful direct, I'm supposed to believe that it's all going to come crashing down somehow when PlayStation and Xbox and PC are all like on the verge of collapse. Like, I'm really supposed to believe that people are just going to magically hate Nintendo and just turn on them because of like $10 price hikes for games. it's laughably stupid. It really, really is. And I really wonder at what point like the Nintendo community is going to start calling it out for what it is. Because I do think there's it is starting to happen. Like we are starting to see more and more people push back against the lies, against the nonsense. You have people who have been doing this stuff for years, like on Twitter talking about it all the time. I've been doing it for a long time at this point, and we're getting more and more, support from the community. Like, I don't know how much longer, like, the general gaming community can try and pretend PC gaming is affordable, that that indie gaming is viable, that like any that there's anything worth like getting hyped for in the future in the non-Nintendo space. Like, I don't know how much longer they can keep like propping up like complete completely irrelevant products like Baldur's Gate 3, right? Like, it's been 2 years at this point, and like I haven't heard anyone talk about Baldur's Gate 3 in forever. Like a game that had no cultural impact, that didn't go anywhere, that didn't win any awards, uh, that was completely forgotten immediately after the year changed. Like, we're really supposed to believe that Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the best RPGs ever made. It just isn't true. Nobody thinks that. Nobody plays the game. Nobody says that. Like, the reality is, Baldur's Gate 3 was only propped up the way it was because it kept PC gaming relevant. It was something that PC gamers could weaponize against console fans, and it really has nothing going for it aside from that. I think what would happen traditionally is that people would complain about Nintendo consoles, they would complain about Nintendo games, and people would take that to be the absolute truth. Because I grew up being told that like Pikmin was lame, that Pokemon was lame, that Zelda was lame. It was a never-ending just barrage of propaganda from game journals, just downplaying pretty much everything Nintendo made that wasn't no, even Mario was downplayed in the early 2000s, if you remember the reception to Sunshine. It's been like it's what's happened since then, I think, is that more and more like actual hardcore fans speak out against anybody who criticizes these brands, right? So when Sunshine came out, the entire cope was like this idea that like it was basic. Mario had failed to evolve. It needed more of a story. The voice acting was cringe. People really thought that Mario was on the verge of falling off with Super Mario Sunshine. What happens? New Super Mario Bros. 4 years later, Super Mario Galaxy the year after that, and following that point, Mario was just this universally beloved brand that nobody could possibly downplay. We're in the early stages of the same thing happening to other B-list Nintendo franchises. Fire Emblem, Xenoblade, Kirby. Like, we saw them, a lot of those games get really disrespected in the past couple of Nintendo Directs. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it took a long time for people to understand the game was good. Like, I myself didn't beat the game until like just recently, and now that I have, it's my all-time favorite Xenoblade, and honestly one of my favorite Switch games, period. Like, I love Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but when that first came out, there was all this cope about the game not being as good as 2 and the tone change. It was censored, bro. I heard so many like insane takes, and then when I actually played it, they all fell apart. And I've been very much involved in like seeing the same narrative kind of fall apart for Mario and Luigi Brothership and Princess Peach Showtime, other Nintendo games that were pretty heavily disregarded by the community. Like, it really does feel as if like there are so many Nintendo games coming out all the time that it's very, very difficult to downplay them to the extent that you did in the 2000s. Like, people love these games, and if you have an enthusiast fan culture around something, it is very difficult to have an organized kind of movement pushing back against it. Honestly, I don't think any Nintendo product has been truly hated since Star Fox Zero came out. And a big part of that was because of furry culture and just the Wii U in general. Like, it just feels like the last gasp of the way things used to be in the 2000s. What I think we're going to see over the next couple of years is the copes kind of falling apart, completely falling apart. Switch 2 is going to be this massive success story. It's going to get all these exciting games. People are going to get fired up for the new entries in their favorite franchises. And the usual suspects, the YouTubers, the game journalists, the people on Twitter, they are going to keep seething. They're going to keep crying about emulation and PC gaming. And more, it is all going to fall apart. They're at the point now where they can't scare people away from buying a Virtual Boy headset. Hardcore fans are going to buy that. Clearly, that's like a thing that has an actual audience for people that will pick it up. But like the people seething about it are upset because it demonstrates the inevitable future of Nintendo. That even a product as notoriously unsuccessful as the Virtual Boy, even something like that, you know, a library of like 22 games or whatever, like even something like that could be resold 30 years later and just find some moderate success. And I do think that's a trend we've been seeing a lot of lately. Because we saw a lot of people say Amiibo weren't successful. You had a lot of people saying that those things were like a dying fad and then no one cares about them anymore. And yet, inexplicably, they have become popular again. I have bought several in the past couple of weeks. So the idea that like Amiibo was this thing that like didn't go anywhere and that didn't do anything and were just this passing fad, it just completely fell apart. And a lot of people aren't even aware that Amiibo are as big as they are, because I saw like people say that like, well, like all these Street Fighter Amiibo are clogging the store shelves. Well, what about all the Amiibo that are selling? Okay. Like again, you're comparing Amiibo to as a collective to unpopular figures. Plenty of Amiibo are selling. I can guarantee you those new Metroid Amiibo are going to sell. I can assure you that uh, the Mario and Rosalina ones will sell. The Kirby ones will sell. If anything, like they're innovating. Kirby Air Riders, like they let you switch the figurine with the vehicle. So, like again, they're innovating on the format. They're doing new things with them, and it's very possible that Amiibo are going to explode in relevancy over the next couple of years or so. We are going to see Amiibo become like a very interesting aspect of like the figurine market, because of their unique functionality with Nintendo Switch 2 games. I think we are on the verge of Amiibo being implemented more frequently into Nintendo games. Kirby Air Riders seems to be utilizing the technology in new and innovative ways. It's very possible that they are planning something new and interesting with the figures going forward. And when that happens, they will explode in popularity. There will be a lot of demand for them. And that suddenly this huge market that Nintendo dominates that people have written off for the past decade is going to be a big moneymaker for them. The community is in denial about the success of Amiibo and what it means for the figurine market, what it means for Nintendo, and what it means for the fans. They don't understand that Nintendo has expanded outside of the realm of traditional video games. At this point, the sales of the consoles and individual games don't matter as much anymore. Something like 10% of Pokemon's total income comes from the mainline games, right? A lot of the rest of it is like merchandise, anime stuff, you name it, like the TCG. Pokemon's expanded outside of the realm of video games for like a long time ago. That's been true forever. And I think we're on the early stages of seeing that happen to other major Nintendo properties. We are going to see more Nintendo merchandise. We are going to see more films. We are going to see more of these kinds of multimedia approaches. And they are going to be successful. And we are going to see more and more people cope and seethe about it. It is remarkable how, to this day, you still see major film critics, people like Angry Joe, seethe about the Mario movie because of just how much that movie mogged everything that he would have preferred to do well. You know, it outperformed Superman, it outperformed Witcher, it outperformed every 40K project. Like, nothing that like Angry Joe says or does is going to stop the Mario movie from being successful. And that's kind of what we're going to see with these video game projects. Because as these multimedia projects become more prominent, as they become more popular, it is going to become more and more difficult to ignore Nintendo success stories. Like, you can't simply say that Nintendo fans they're in a closed garden and they only play on Nintendo consoles and these brands can't make it in the real entertainment industry. Like, Mario is bigger than anything in Hollywood. You know, Pokemon is bigger than everything. So this entire mindset that people have that Nintendo is going to have this like fall off point and people aren't going to buy their consoles anymore and they're just going to go bankrupt and Disney's going to own the IPs, like none of that is ever going to happen. And what's becoming more and more clear is that the community just can't handle this reality. They are going to keep coping and seething about Nintendo, honestly, probably until they die. Like, that's kind of my mentality at this point, looking at the people who are like adamant like about never owning a Switch 2, never owning a Nintendo console. Like, these guys are going to cope and seethe about Nintendo until they drop dead because it's such an integral part of their identity. They've hinged their entire careers on it. They've revolved their lives around hating Nintendo. They obsess over them constantly. Like, these people religiously hate Nintendo because that's what they've been trained to do by these Nintendo commercials, and just Sony's general marketing strategy. You know, in the real world, Nintendo is super popular and it will continue to do well and succeed, but the general gaming population cannot bring itself to admit it, even at this stage.